the majestic city of Venice, the queen of the Adriatic. Behind the elegant facades of arches and canals lies the turbulent story of a 1,000-year republic, a formidable naval power. Yet this great city had an unusual beginning. In the high days of the Roman Empire, the coastal lagoon held only small fishing settlements. But in the 5th century AD, the Western Roman Empire was ravaged by barbarian peoples. As Italy became a battlefield for Huns, Goths, Eastern Romans, and Lombards, many fled to the safety of the lagoon. In 726, these refugees elected Orso as their doge, the first in an unbroken line of 117 doges who would rule Venice for a millennium. For nearly 2 centuries, much of Italy fell under the revived Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire. Its Italian domain, the Exarchate of Ravenna, succumbed to the Lombards in 751. Only Venice held out, securely shielded by its waters. When the Pope called for aid, Charlemagne and the Franks descended into Italy and crushed the Lombards. Yet they could not take Venice. Charlemagne's son, Pepin, king of Italy, is said to have died of a fever caught in the marshes around Venice while attempting to attack the city. In the decades that followed, Venice affirmed its independence from Byzantium. By virtue of its position, it became the broker between Europe and the East. Venetian merchants sold Italian grain and wine to Constantinople and brought back spices and silk for Western markets. Above all, early Venetian wealth was built on salt, the vital preservative of the medieval world, harvested from salterns and lagoons. Venetians even called salt il vero fondamento del nostro Stato, the true foundation of our state. In 828, 2 Venetian merchants visiting Alexandria secretly carried off what they believed to be the body of St. Mark to raise the city's prestige. His relics were interred in a new great church, St. Mark's Basilica. The first basilica was destroyed by fire in 976. Today's basilica, consecrated in 1094, stands on the same site. St. Mark became the city's patron, and his emblem, the winged lion, its heraldic sign and battle standard. Venice's eastern trade suffered from pirates along the Balkan and North African coasts, so the city built a fleet to sweep them from the seas and garrisoned key harbors and islands along the Adriatic. By 1000, the doges of Venice were also styling themselves Dukes of Dalmatia. The basic Venetian warship was the galley, driven by about 150 oars and lateen sails, fore and aft, armed with a ram and some 30 crossbowmen. Galleys also carried precious cargoes, spices, silks, gemstones. In 1103, construction began on the famed Venetian arsenal, a vast state dockyard that became one of Europe's great industrial centers, employing around 2,000 workers and turning out hundreds of ships a year. A pioneer in many proto-industrial techniques, it sustained Venice's sea power for centuries. Backed by a powerful fleet and lucrative concessions from the Byzantine emperor, Venice rose to be the preeminent commercial and naval power of the Eastern Mediterranean. Its strength, however, rested as much on shrewd deal-making and self-interest as on arms. This was the age of the Crusades, and Venice stood close to the Crusader states as ally and trading partner. In 1202, the Fourth Crusade came to Venice seeking transport to Egypt, but could not pay. Doge Enrico Dandolo sensed opportunity. In exchange for loans, he first steered the Crusaders to seize Zara for Venice, and then, as relations with Byzantium soured, to strike at Constantinople itself. In 1204, the greatest Christian city of the world was sacked by the self-proclaimed warriors of Christ. Venice took its share of the spoils, most famously the 4 bronze horses from Constantine's hippodrome, resettled on the facade of St. Mark's. Doge Enrico and the Crusaders carved up the Byzantine Empire. Venice gained Aegean islands, Crete, and the strategic ports of Modon and Corinth. Thereafter, the two eyes of the Republic. This windfall brought immense wealth and power, and fierce rivalry with another Italian sea-state, Genoa. For more than a century, the two cities fought for mastery in the east, their wars spanning the Levant to Sicily, the Aegean to the Black Sea, and the Adriatic. During these struggles, a Venetian captain named Marco Polo was captured and used his time in a Genoese prison to dictate the tale of his travels in China. Rivalry widened into a regional conflict. Genoa allied with the Habsburg Duke of Austria, the King of Hungary and Padua. Venice aligned with a restored Byzantium, Cyprus, and Milan. War brought disaster in 1379 when Genoese forces seized Chioggia, only 24 kilometers south of Venice itself. But Venice reversed the crisis, for the first time deploying galleys armed with gunpowder artillery to trap and capture the Genoese fleet. The wars ended in 1381 with the Peace of Turin. Venice, like Genoa, was exhausted and made significant concessions. But Genoa soon fell into internal strife, while Venice staged a remarkable resurgence, thanks largely to its unique system of government. Most wondrous Venice, rich in gold but richer in glory, strong in power but stronger in virtue, built as much upon the harmony of her citizens as upon solid marble. Petrarch. While Western Europe largely bowed to kings claiming divine right, several Italian communes revived classical ideas of rule. Above all, the res publica, the public thing. At its height, however, the Most Serene Republic of Venice was in patrician hands. Only those whose names appeared in the Golden Book, the register of the nobility, could sit in the Great Council, which appointed high officials through elaborate voting and lots. From the council, 40 were chosen to form the Quarantia for economic and judicial affairs, and 300 formed the Senate, the chief legislative body that included the Republic's admirals, generals, and diplomats. The head of state remained the elected Doge. His powers steadily shrank. By the 1400s, Venetians joked he was little more than a tavern sign, a ceremonial symbol still wielding great influence. The chief executive organ was the Signoria, the Doge, 6 councillors of the Minor Council, and 3 members of the Council of 40. They could be joined by 3 boards of Savi, wise men, to form the full college. The Council of 10 held extraordinary powers to police abuses. So many checks and balances accumulated that change, for better or worse, seemed both unthinkable and undesirable. The Constitution of Venice, an irresistible model of wisdom and efficiency, a form that secures the welfare of its members. Gasparo Contarini. Across Europe, Venice's system came to be praised as a perfect balance of democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy, ensuring social harmony and stability. The myth of Venice, as it later was called, overlooked real coups, corruption, and social tension. Yet Venetians achieved what was rare in the medieval and Renaissance world: a durable, orderly, effective government. The Republic had another strikingly modern asset: Europe's finest diplomatic corps, seasoned envoys at every court, reporting to Venice in secret cipher from across the continent. They would need every advantage, for fiercer storms lay ahead. Your great error, Venetians, was to meddle in the peace of other states. You are alone, and the whole world is against you. Galeazzo Sforza, Duke of Milan, 1467. For centuries, Venice had stayed out of Italian land wars, focusing on its overseas dominion. But the war with Genoa, and especially the fall of Chioggia, exposed the city's vulnerability. In 1404, former allies, the Carraresi of Padua, struck Venice. The Republic raised a national host and prevailed, annexing Padua, conquering Verona, and pushing on into Friuli. Doge Francesco Foscari, who would rule for 34 years, longer than any other Doge, believed Venice must keep expanding on the mainland for its own security. He spent the Republic's vast wealth hiring mercenary companies led by captains known in Italy as condottieri, from condotta, contract. Once largely foreign, Catalan, German, Hungarian, even English, by the 1400s, these leaders were Italians, waging wars for rival states and sometimes carving out realms of their own. Mercenaries often switched sides for better pay. Their men were as fickle as their masters. Fighting for gain, not glory, they avoided slaughter when they could. Their battles could be theatrical and nearly bloodless. Venice's ambitions and her condottieri brought her into collision with the leading power of northern Italy, the Duchy of Milan. A long war began. The Venetians won a great victory at Meclodio. Peace enlarged Venice's frontier west beyond Bergamo to the Adda, but fighting soon resumed. For almost 30 years, mercenary bands ravaged the north. Figures like Francesco Sforza and Bartolomeo Colleoni made their names. At last, by the Peace of Lodi, Venice secured the Domini di Terraferma, the mainland state, alongside the Stato da Mar, her overseas empire. 40 years of relative peace followed, until 1494, when King Charles VIII of France invaded Italy with a great army. Charles sought to press dynastic claims to Naples, but his march united even sworn enemies like Milan and Venice. Italian states formed the Lega Veneta under Pope Alexander VI and fought Charles at Fornovo, yet could not prevent his retreat. Thus began the long Italian Wars, 6 tumultuous decades, pitting French kings against Habsburg emperors, with northern Italy as their main battlefield, amid the Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation. Italian unity was brief. Venice soon changed sides, allying with France against Milan to gain land. Her ambitions alarmed her neighbors, none more ruthless than the Pope. Pope Julius II, the patron who set Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel and created the Swiss Guard, vowed to break Venetian power. Venice, he thundered, would be reduced to a fishing village. He placed the Republic under interdict, effectively suspending the Church's sacraments, and forged the League of Cambrai, the most formidable coalition any Italian state had faced. An existential crisis followed. In 1509, at Agnadello, Venetian forces suffered a crushing defeat by the French king. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote that Venice, in one day, lost what had taken 800 years to acquire. But these wars were famous for their whiplash alliances. Within a year, the Pope switched sides, allying with Venice against France. Then Venice shifted again, joining France against the Pope, helping crush papal Swiss mercenaries at Marignano. 8 years after the League of Cambrai sought Venice's ruin, the Treaty of Noyon restored virtually all her territories. Through nimble diplomacy, political flexibility, and some luck, the Republic survived. I was astonished at the sight of that city. Philippe de Comines. Despite long wars, Venice drove the Italian Renaissance. The 15th and 16th centuries were her golden age. She fostered masters such as Giovanni and Gentile Bellini, Vittore Carpaccio, Titian and Tintoretto, architects like Palladio, and scholars like Francesco Barbaro, among the early humanists devoted to recovering, studying, and spreading the texts of Greece and Rome. The city became a beacon for Europe's greatest minds, Erasmus of Rotterdam and Galileo, who demonstrated his telescope to the Doge. Venetians, though, prided themselves more on craft than contemplation. Their city was a workshop of excellence, famed for glass, silk, cottons, and carved wood. Nowhere did mercantile and scholarly traditions merge more brilliantly than in printing. In 1469, Doge Cristoforo Moro granted the city's first printing license. Within 30 years, Venice printed more books than Florence, Milan, Rome and Naples combined. Here, Aldus Manutius pioneered the portable paperback and set out to publish all surviving Greek classics. By the end of the 15th century, Venice was the world capital of printing. All this industry unfolded in a city often called the most beautiful on earth. Venetians married Renaissance ideals to their waterbound setting and made a masterpiece: the Grand Canal, the Rialto Bridge, the Bridge of Sighs where prisoners took a last look before descending to their cells, and along the canal, the palazzi of the city's great merchant families. For all its grandeur, doing business here could be ruthless. Venetian merchants were the most perfidious, lying, thieving scoundrels I had ever imagined, wrote the visiting German artist Albrecht Dürer. And enemies warned, "Do not wake our terrible sword, for we shall wage the fiercest war on you everywhere. Do not trust to your treasures, for we will surely relieve you of them." Sultan Selim II to the Signoria of Venice. As Venetian culture flourished, the Maritime Empire faced a new, dire threat. In 1453, the Byzantine Empire, weakened in part by Venice 2 centuries earlier, fell to the Ottoman Turks. At first, relations were businesslike. Venetian traders remained in Constantinople with their old privileges, but there were no illusions about the Sultan's next target. Mehmed the Conqueror was determined to destroy the Venetian Republic. The onslaught began. Argos and Negroponte fell, despite Venice's efforts to defend its outposts. This struggle would flare and fade for more than 200 years. The once dominant Venetian fleet was outmatched by the Ottomans, led by admirals like Hayreddin Barbarossa. By 1500, even the Republic's two eyes, Modon and Coron, were lost. Doge after doge could only watch Venetian power crumble in the east. In 1570, the Ottomans struck Cyprus. Famagusta surrendered after an 11-month siege. In violation of terms, the Venetian commander, Marcantonio Bragadin, was flayed alive. At last, a Christian alliance coalesced. The Holy League, led by Venice and Spain, sailed east. They met the Turks in the largest galley battle in history, Lepanto. Burning to avenge Bragadin, the Venetians helped lead a stunning victory. Yet for all its glory, the battle changed little in the Mediterranean balance. Ottoman pressure was checked, not broken. The possession of Crete is the outer line of defense for Italy, the gate through which the treacherous force of the Turk may pour to harm much of Europe. Venetian envoy Giovanni Sagredo to Oliver Cromwell. A period of peace followed, but Venice was now a weakening power. Her prestige had always been wedded to command of the sea, and that command was slipping. She also lagged in shipbuilding. While Venice clung to galleys, Portuguese and Spanish captains sailed caravels and carracks into the Atlantic, opening new sea routes west to the Americas, east to India, and on to East Asia. For centuries, Venice's wealth had flowed from Eastern trade via Byzantium and then the Ottomans. Now she was sidelined. And as Venice fought costly wars in Italy and the Mediterranean, plague returned again and again. The Black Death first struck in 1348. Later outbreaks in 1575 and 1629 were almost as deadly, each taking about a third of the city's people. Authorities did what they could. Residents were told to stay home. An exception was made only to bury Titian. New arrivals isolated aboard ship for 40 days. Quarantena, the root of our word quarantine. In a Venice weakened by war and plague, the Ottomans saw an opening. In 1645, they attacked the Republic's last great overseas possession, Crete. Venice rallied. Nobles raised funds. Crowned heads across Europe were urged to fight again for Christendom. But this time, Venice stood alone. Most of Crete fell quickly. Only Candia held, under the stubborn Francesco Morosini, who, they said, went into battle with his cat at his side. The port resisted for 21 years, one of the longest sieges in history. At sea, the struggle was titanic. Venetian and Ottoman fleets nearly matched. But alone, Venice could not save Crete. In 1669, after thousands dead and a ruined city, Candia surrendered. After 465 years of Venetian rule, Crete was gone. She is reduced to a passive existence, a mere spectator of events, affecting a disinterest in them. Count Pierre Daru. 15 years later, Venice and Doge Morosini had a chance at revenge. After the Ottoman defeat before Vienna in 1683, Venice joined the Great Counteroffensive, the Great Turkish War. Morosini retook Lefkada and the Peloponnese, then called them Morea. But at the siege of Athens, a Venetian round struck the Parthenon, where the Ottomans stored powder, blowing down columns and the roof of a 2,000-year-old temple. The new Greek territories did not stay Venetian for long. By 1714, the Ottomans were strong enough to sweep through the Morea again. This Seventh Ottoman-Venetian War was the last, for Venice was no longer a Mediterranean great power. In the 18th century, Venice still dazzled as a cultural beacon, a city of canals, domes, opera, and art. But the state had become one of stately, luxurious stagnation. Rigidly conservative, unable to reform. Industry, commerce, and military strength withered. So when the French Revolutionary Wars again turned northern Italy into a battlefield, Venice had nothing to set against them. In 1796, a young French general, Napoleon Bonaparte, demanded the Republic's submission. The Doge and Great Council had no choice but to accept. With Italian revolutionaries, the French dismantled the symbols of the old order and of a proud millennium of independence. The horses of St. Mark were among hundreds of artworks shipped to Paris. At a festival of liberty, the robes and regalia of the last Doge and the Golden Book itself were carried into St. Mark's Square and burned. 1,000 years of Venetian independence were over. In 1797, Venice passed to Austria, then into Napoleon's Kingdom of Italy, and after his fall back to Austria as part of the Lombardo-Venetian Kingdom. But Venetian patriotism was not extinguished. In 1848, inspired by revolutions across Europe, the city rose against Austria and proclaimed the Republic of San Marco. Austria slowly regained its Italian lands, yet Venice, aided by her old ally, the sea, held out the longest. The Austrians even launched bomb-bearing balloons, the first air bombardment in history, with little effect. After a 17-month siege, Venice capitulated and returned to Austrian rule. But the fires of 1848 had kindled Italian nationalism. The dreams of the Risorgimento came true in the 1860s, and Venice became part of the new Kingdom of Italy. The empire was gone, but Venice's splendor was not. She remained a magnet for artists and poets. Her architecture and lagoon enchanted painters like Turner and Monet. Her romantic waterways drew writers from Lord Byron to Ernest Hemingway. Today, Venice wrestles with mass tourism and rising seas. Venetians fight back, pressuring authorities to reroute the largest cruise ships and cap tour group sizes. Yet Venice stands on the front line of a global climate crisis. Some fear the city could be claimed by the sea before the century ends. This most unlikely city, once the heart of a mighty maritime empire that endured for over 1,000 years, now faces new battles. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, leave a like, and share it with your friends.